Hi, everybody. It is Thursday evening. It is 8 o'clock. We are trying again. It's 5 past 8, 6 past, 7 past 8. I'm trying again. I think it's working now. Let me know if it is. If you can see us, just post a comment, then we can see if it is coming through. We should be live now. It looks like we are live. I can see us on Facebook at least. I can't see if we're on YouTube, if we're live on YouTube. Okay, looks like we're there. We are on YouTube. We are on Facebook. I haven't got any comments. Is anyone watching? Say hello. It'll be nice to know where you're watching from. Tonight, we are going to be taking your questions. Hi, Tracy. Tracy's there. Always faithful to say hi when I ask someone to say something in the comments. Tonight, we are going to be taking your questions, and we're hoping to do this more often. And we received quite a few interesting questions. I don't know how many questions we'll get to tonight. I have a suspicion that we might just cover the first one, which is about weed, as you might have seen from the title of this video, Should Christians Use Weed? My sister is watching, and her kids. And so we're going to go into that question. There's quite a lot to unpack there, and it would be great for you guys to engage. So if you do have further questions, post them in the chat. That's probably one of the best ways we can engage around this kind of a topic. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna teach a bit into this topic. And teach around that, but I want to encourage you to engage with what I'm teaching. Give your perspective, give your input, because I think this is an important topic, and we'll see the things. There's a couple of interesting principles that come out of this topic that I think are really important for us to speak about, and are important principles for any believer to engage with. Not just around the question of weed or marijuana or dacha or anything like that, but the principles that lie beneath that or that underpin the decisions we make around these things. And it's true. Oh, there we go, Hendrik, you got on. I don't know what was going on. I don't know why the first stream, it seemed like it didn't work, and then all of a sudden it came through, and then I cut it off because I thought it wasn't working. So please do take a moment to share this video, to like the video, share it. That's a way that other people can get a hold of it. If you want to get a hold of any of our content, you can always go to our website. The podcast versions are available there as well if you prefer to listen, because I know an hour is sometimes very long to watch. Some people just like to listen. You can download the podcast. We have tons of podcasts on there, and you can just go and listen to them on your own time. And so let's get into this. Tonight, Roxy will be joining me. Kids are taking a little bit longer to fall asleep, especially Leah. We've just gotten 2 baby kittens, and what that means is that the excitement level in our house is just on another level, and so I think she's especially battling to just come down and just process the day of kitten play and what she's going to do tomorrow to mommy them. So if you do have a moment, please do pray for our kittens. They get a lot of mommying. Whether they like that or not. Okay, so I wanted to share. Actually, let's stay there for a second, and just talk about this topic. I'm just going to see if this is coming through here. I just want to share it quickly. It is coming through. Okay, cool. I'm fully behind the use of medicinal marijuana. It helped me a lot. Actually, that's something I wanted to Google, and I forgot to Google that. And I'm glad you're reminding me of that, Hendrik, as we start. I do believe, and I take this from a source I spoke to, who was themselves have used dacha or have used smoked weed as a drug, and have used it medicinally as well. And they say that there is no is it HTC? No, I'm forgetting. THC in medicinal marijuana. I think some of them have, but I think a lot of them don't have THC in them. So just correct me if I'm wrong on that. I actually wanted to Google that, and I never had the chance. Trying to Google that quickly. So let me know. I'm not sure exactly what the answer is. I'm not sure I'm going to find it just quickly. If I will find the exact answer, I'm just quickly scanning a few articles. Okay, so No TH. That's what we were told at school. No THC. Okay, you are correct. Yeah. So that's the big difference there with medicinal marijuana. Okay, so let's begin with the question. So the question is, should Christians be using weed? Should Christians partake of weed? And it's kind of framed in the way, and I'm not reading the exact question now in front of me, but I've thought of this and dealt with this so much over the last few days. It's framed in the context that a Christian can enjoy a glass of wine in moderation, with their friends, with their family. Why can't we do the same with weed? Why can't I, as a Christian, enjoy some weed recreationally without overdoing it? Why is that frowned upon? Why is that looked down upon? And should it be? So there's a couple of questions in that. Now, the first thing, obviously, that you go to when you talk about this topic is it legal? Which, obviously, it's only been legal in South Africa since 2018. And in many countries, using marijuana, smoking weed, ingesting it recreationally is still illegal. So if you're in a country where it's illegal or in a state where it's illegal, I know in the States there's different laws for different states, then as a Christian, your responsibility, according to Romans 12, is to obey the laws of your country. So I would say you don't really have a go-to there. If you're in a country where it's still illegal, you don't even have a question about it. You simply do not have the luxury as a believer to be representing Christ and be disobeying the laws of your country. It's just not what we as Christians do. It would be the same as just perpetually driving over the speed limit or perpetually doing any other thing that is against the laws of your country. I'm just seeing my sister saying some of the medicinal does have, I know a friend's mom that was dying and was for pain relief in her last days. That's what I heard as well, is that most medicinal is uses the, it has, what do you call it? CBD oil, it's a CBD and it doesn't have THC in, but that some of them, for this person also said, for some particular pain relief issue that would have THC in. In the Bible, it says use plant from the earth. Medicinal use, yes. Calming use, yes. But just to get high, a big no-no. Well, that's the question, I think, is calming use versus getting a high. And I suppose that's where the question comes in. So let's look at a few scriptures that I think are important way to begin this discussion. So I'm going to teach on a few scriptures. And I will... I'm going to try and engage with your chat as well while I'm teaching, but please understand it's going to be difficult for me to really teach and fully engage. So try and maybe just hold off the questions or the engagement just in between sections as I teach. So the first scripture I want us to look at here is 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 23. And here the context is that Paul is talking about an issue in the church in Corinth where people were partaking of food sacrificed to idols, and it was done in a way that was causing other believers to stumble. There was an issue there, not just with the use of this food, because it was fine to use it, but actually the way it was causing other believers to stumble in the context of the church, people who have come from a background of pagan worship. And so Paul makes this comment. He says, all things are lawful, but not all things are profitable. All things are lawful, but not all things edify. So he uses these two phrases. All things are lawful, but not all things are profitable, or edify are the two words he uses there. And this is really important because the language Paul is using here is consistent. He uses the same language again and again in regards to this issue of what is it okay for us as Christians to do in regards to things where the Bible hasn't given us a clear prohibition. The Bible hasn't said, thou shalt not smoketh weed. And there is no such law in the Bible. So we cannot say that just based purely on the Bible's instruction that this is a sin. So he's saying, even if it's lawful, it's not necessarily profitable. It's not necessarily edifying. And so we need to look a little bit at what these words mean. So I'm doing this for the first time. I'm using my iPad. Tracy, it was you who inspired me. My iPad literally, this is a miracle because this iPad was literally dead for months. I could not get it to work. I could not get it to update. It was a bricked iPad. And I turned it back on and it updated and everything and it worked again and I was able to get it to work with Lonely Screen. So it's a miracle. A miracle iPad. My dear wife is joining us. Oh, and I've got water because I'm thirsty. Okay, so we're already in the question.
Yes, I was listening.
About, oh, you were with us.
Yes.
Okay, cool. So I want to just sort of get into this a little bit. Where are we? Okay, cool. I'm just checking my screens look the same. So this word is the word profitable. My writing is not going to be great. And that word there is the Greek word. Oh, are we connected? We're not connected for some reason. Hang on. Give me a second. Let's try this again. Okay. I was just bragging about how my iPad just worked again, and now it's not working. Let me just try this one more time before I give up on it. There we go. There we go. Okay, cool. This might help. So,
thanks, Colin.
look at Roxy's earrings while I'm fiddling around with tonight's many technical difficulties. So, it says profitable, which is the word symphero, which is a great word. It's not related to anything to do with the symphony, but that's a great way of thinking of this word, because in most of the Greek text in which this word is used, it's talking about something that isn't just profitable for the individual, but is actually profitable for the group. It's something that is, the meaning is really about the community, profitable for the community. And this is picked up on because this word is used in 1 Corinthians 12. So again, Paul in the same book is using this word. And notice where he uses it. He says, but to each one is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. That's the same word. That's the word symphero. It means the common good. It's profitable for everyone. That's what Paul is trying to bring across with the point of spiritual gifts. He's saying this is really good for everybody. This is really beneficial for everybody. And you need to think about that. He's saying you need to think about what's good for the church when you think about these things. These things that are potentially lawful, but may not actually be a beneficial thing for the common good, for the benefit of the church. And so then a similar idea comes up when we look at Ephesians 5 verse, now I must just remember if it is verse 18. So this verse says, do not get drunk with wine, for that is dissipation, but be filled with the Holy Spirit. So here Paul is using this, he's sort of contrasting dissipation, and he's contrasting it with verses filled with the Spirit. He's contrasting those two ideas. He's saying there's one way of living which is wasteful. It is that word dissipation, sometimes people translate it with like a word like debauchery, which sometimes sounds like, oh, it's like really bad sin, debauchery, but that's not really what the word means. It really means dissipation is a better word because it means really to waste. Okay. It's to throw away what God has given you. It's to not use what God has given you, not use the opportunity, the whatever it is that God's put in your hand, not to waste it, but to dissipate it, and especially in relation to your life. So he's here saying, don't get drunk with wine. Don't overuse wine so that you lose control of your body, you lose control of your mind is no longer sober, because that's dissipation. That's a waste of your life. You're wasting your life. You're wasting what the benefit of your life is. Instead, be filled with the Holy Spirit. So you see there's a bit of a theme here, because what Paul is saying in 1 Corinthians 12 that we just looked at, he's saying to each one is given a manifestation of the Spirit. So each of us carries a manifestation of the Spirit for the common good of the church, so that the church is edified. This is what he's saying. Get your mind out of what's just good for me. Think of what's good for the church. And then we go back to the verse we were looking at, 1 Corinthians 10, verse 23. And there, that's exactly what he's saying. He says, all things are lawful, I'm going to go back to the chat. All things are lawful. Oops.
But not all.
But not all things are profitable. Not all things are lawful, but not all things edify. And then look at the very next verse. Let no one seek his own good, but that of his neighbor. So I think this principle is really important. The principle that we think about these things in regards to the body, in regards to the community of faith, and what is the best for the community of faith, not just what's the best for me as an individual. So that's the first thing that I think of, that you need to think of when you think of these things in terms of scriptural principles. And then the next question you need to ask yourself is, okay, so is it good? Is it good for me? And is it good for others?
And then how does it influence the body?
How does it influence myself and other people?
Yeah.
And what good is there in this? Is this profitable? Is this building up? Because if it's not building me up, if it's not profitable even for me personally,
Then how could it be for the body?
it's gonna be it's not gonna bring anything good. It's not gonna add anything. It's not gonna
Edify the body.
it's not gonna profit anyone anything. Let's look at what Hendrik has got there. 1 Peter 4. Let's have a look at that verse. I'll come back to the Peter 4 verse 1. Therefore, since Christ has suffered in the flesh, arm yourselves also with the same purpose, because he has suffered in the flesh, has ceased from sin, so as to live the rest of time in the flesh no longer for the lusts of men, but for the will of God. For the time already past is sufficient for you to have carried out the desire of the Gentiles, having pursued a course of sensuality, lust, drunkenness, carousing. I'm just seeing, I don't think I'll read all the way to verse 6, but verse 4 says, in all this they are surprised that you do not run with them into the same excess of dissipation, and they malign you. Yeah. So there's, again, this concept of going just for the things that just waste your life, that just pour out your life without benefit. Okay, so I wanted to just lay that as a foundation, because there's a couple of things here kind of that Paul is saying. I want to just go back to a previous page if I can. Let's go to another page there. So the iPad might not be completely broken, but it's still not 100%.
It's not completely working.
Yeah, it's not completely working either. So he's saying there's the Holy Spirit, there's what is profitable for all, and I'm going to just write there common good. And then he's putting that over and against being drunk. Obviously, we're not talking about alcohol. We're going to talk about the alcohol connection in a moment. Being drunk, which is really losing control. Not being sound mind, not being in your full faculty. Being drunk, dissipation. If you can even read that. And that is also what it means to be selfish.
Yeah.
Because you're thinking of yourself.
Not of the body and the common good of the body.
You're thinking of yourself, but even then we're going to actually, as we uncover this a bit more, you're going to actually find it's not even selfishness, it's self-destructive sometimes, these behaviors that we get into. Now just hear me out. I'm not just crashing on the whole weed thing straight away. I want to just sort of get into this systematically and uncover a few thoughts here. Okay, so then if that's the case, then why can you, so I'm going to jump into this question, why can you enjoy a glass of wine? Why can a Christian enjoy a glass of wine with their family or friends? And I mean, we've been in many Christian gatherings as well, where everyone was comfortable with wine. They didn't use it in excess.
Yeah.
And we've used wine for communion. We've used wine for a meal with other Christians, and it's been beneficial. It's been uplifting, and we've been in many contexts like that. But I know there are other contexts where people will not drink.
Yeah.
And I mean, I wouldn't go into
that.
into a context where people don't drink wine or alcohol at all, or have an issue with that, and then come there with my bottle of wine.
Yeah, totally.
And be very sensitive to that. The thing is, I don't really know of any Christians who gather to smoke us all together. I don't know if that's a thing, and this is kind of
maybe we hang out in the wrong
maybe
Christian
we
circles.
hang out in the wrong circles. Maybe we hang out in the wrong circles. But if you look at, so wine. Let's just write here: wine versus weed. If you look at this, even from a scriptural perspective, in the Bible, wine is often mentioned.
Yes.
Sometimes in very positive light. It's good for
Jesus
you.
even turned water into wine. It was a miracle.
Yeah.
Jesus made wine. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a miracle.
Wine was part of their culture. It was an absolute part of the culture. I mean, we've only got two institutions as a church. It's baptism and the Lord's Supper. It was with wine.
Yeah.
And I know people have made arguments that they've said, the wine in the Bible isn't really, it's not alcoholic and all that. I mean, there is simply not a single scholar. I've actually made a video on this if you want to go and watch it on the YouTube channel. There's simply not a scholar in anywhere that's worth their salt that makes that argument. There is no argument for that. What we do know is that the wine in biblical times was probably less alcoholic than, especially in South Africa. Our wine is very high content. But it's simply not an argument, because otherwise how could they say do not get drunk with wine if the wine was non-alcoholic? It just wasn't a reality. They couldn't make non-alcoholic wine. They didn't have the technology to make that. So their wine was alcoholic, and they used it for festivals. And actually, when you see a lot of the context in which wine is used in the Old Testament, in the Lord's Supper, in many contexts, it is very much about fellowship. It's very much something where people come together for a meal, for celebrating, for joining together. Now, I'm not saying we have to, as Christians, fellowship with wine.
No, it's not a necessity or a must. Or
Yeah, I mean, that's again a thing of conscience. There's many people who wouldn't feel comfortable with that. But it is biblically sound that wine was a part of festivals.
Yeah.
Wine was a thing that brought people together. It was a thing that that there was a communal aspect to that, as opposed to weed, which the thing with, and that's why I made that joke, is you could maybe be in a context where Christians will have a glass of wine together in certain contexts, or even have communion with wine. Many churches do that, have wine for their communion. But I don't know of a way in which a Christian would say to their life group, hey guys, you want to hang around? We're all going to smoke some weed after life group. I don't know how any Christian context people will be like, yeah, that sounds good. That there wouldn't be a single person there whose conscience would seriously be affected by someone saying that. So that to me says, why can't you do it out in the open? Why can't you do it publicly? Why can't you do it in a context of church gathering? That would be a big question mark. And so what it does is it actually isolates. It was interesting. I was listening to a pastor who used to be a weed. He used to smoke weed. I don't want to call him a weed smoker. He used to smoke weed. I think he used other drugs as well before he got saved and he's now a pastor. Yeah. And he was sharing his testimony. It's a video, a clip online. He was sharing his testimony, and he was just saying how he found that weed would isolate him more and more and more.
Sure.
And the more that he used it, the more isolated he became. Even when he was using it with other people, even then he was becoming more and more isolated. Because it's very much a selfish endeavor. It's a self-seeking endeavor. Now, if you're drinking wine to get drunk, you will also do it
also for isolation.
To isolate yourself. And you will do it when you're alone as well. Yeah. But the difference with between wine and weed, I think there's a couple of differences. The one is, with wine, you can do it in moderation. You can do it in moderation. You can have a glass of wine if you know what your limits are. Everyone's got different limits, and people need to know their limits. Some people can't use wine.
Yeah.
Some people have a background, or it sets them off immediately. Actually, one of the people I spoke to in preparation for this, who also used weed and other drugs, they still say to this day they can't even have a little bit of wine. It'll just get them drunk straight away. So they don't drink. That's where they are.
Yeah,
at.
You respect that. Yeah.
And so this is the thing with wine, is you can enjoy wine in moderation, and you can control its enjoyment. With weed, and I have not used this before, so I asked a lot of different people. I asked the same person I'm speaking about now. I watched a whole bunch of people online. I've had conversations with other people who have used it, and a lot of people say the same kind of thing. It's a one, what am I writing here? I'm just going to write it like this. One hit wonder. Someone used that term, and then I just grabbed that term because it's easy to write. Basically, the point is, HTC is a powerful chemical. So if you take even a little bit of weed, it immediately begins to affect your
Get your
brain.
brain, yeah.
It immediately affects your state of consciousness. It immediately puts you in a different state. And that is the question, because immediately then are you
Still in sound mind? Is what you're doing good for the body, for corporately, or is it just about me and I'm no longer in control, in sound mind of sound mind? Yeah.
And that happens pretty instantly. It's not something that you have to. There isn't a line that you can draw.
A boundary. Yeah.
I'm just going to read some of the comments quickly because I know I'm waffling on here. The moment you allow yourself to be led astray by weed or booze, then you are not wise. Proverbs 20 states it. Isn't that actually motivated behavior, culturally motivated behavior? Tracy, just let us know what you mean by that one, because I know I've said a lot of things, so maybe it was in relation to a particular point. Or other stuff for that matter. Weed is a type of plant herb, right? Yes, it is. Weed was illegal, so there is that connotation. Yes, absolutely, it was illegal. And again, I don't advocate for making these things illegal. I don't think that that's necessarily the way to go. That's just my personal opinion. I don't think making things illegal actually solves the problem at all.
Yeah.
And I think the best example of that, I know I'm contradicting myself because I'm now relating it to wine, but was the prohibition. I just don't think it actually gets to the root of the problem. I think part of the problem with making the substance the problem, in any case, in weed included, and I'm going to get there, is that we actually take the focus away from the bigger question, which we'll get to, which is why am I doing it?
Why do I need something to depend on?
Why am I drinking too much?
What am I trying to
Why do I want to smoke weed? That's the question, actually. So I don't necessarily think that the government should be regulating. Maybe regulating, but I don't know if it should be something where they should just outrightly ban something. I mean, there's another argument to be made about something like heroin, obviously, which is just totally life destroying. But again, I'm not going to go into that argument because I know people have different arguments about that. Just some humor. Read Proverbs 15:17. Okay, we'll get to that one in a minute. Okay, so just some other stuff. Where am I? There we go. So this is the difference between wine and weed. Wine, there is ways in which in the Bible it brings in celebration,
Yes.
it brings in fellowship,
I think
in
maybe
moderation.
that's what Tracy was talking about with the culturally motivated behavior. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Yeah, maybe Tracy, if you can clarify that, I'd really want to know what you're referring to. And weed, on the other hand, can isolate you more and more and more.
It takes you
It
away
can take
from
people,
the community, from the body.
and that's where this thing of what is for the common good. This thing keeps jumping to the help settings every time I press F1. What is for the common good? Let me just see if I can go back there to that scripture. What is the good of your neighbor? The question that we need to keep asking ourselves: what is profitable? The other thing is that wine, in moderation, I'm not going to have space here to write all that, but is not harmful.
What do you mean by harmful? To myself or?
Not harmful. So look, wine can be harmful, obviously.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah, wine can be incredibly harmful. If I drink too much,
I could harm myself and others.
it can be incredibly harmful. But again, I'm saying in moderation, in a small quantity, even taken over many, many years. I can drink a small amount of wine every day for years and years and years. It's not going to have an adverse effect on my health. In fact, there are some scientific studies that show wine, especially red wine, can be very good for your health in small quantities over time. Paul even says that to Timothy, take some wine for your health. So it's not intrinsically harmful to your health, wine. So I'm just making the argument because the point I'm trying to make is that we can't put these two things in the same category. We have to look at them in different ways. And I think it's unhelpful to say, oh, we can have a glass of wine, therefore I can have
I can smoke
weed, because it's not the same thing. Weed, on the other hand, can be... trying to write, I need to get a different stylus. can be harmful. I'm saying can, because it's not always harmful. And I know there's different studies. There have been so many studies done on this. But if you go, interestingly enough, if you go on any medical website, I went onto about 4 or 5 different medical websites, all of them will cite studies that have shown the dangers of smoking marijuana, smoking weed. All of them cite the dangers because, unlike with wine, there are documented cases of people who smoke one joint and go psychotic.
Wow.
And it happens seldomly. It's not common, but it happens. There are people in any city in the world today. You can go to a psychiatric ward and you can ask them, is there someone here who is psychotic as a result of weed? And there most likely is someone there. Now, it's a small percentage, but the point is it can be harmful even in small amounts.
Yeah.
It is known to be harmful for children. It is known to damage brain development with children. That is, many studies have shown that. So for a child, it is a no-no. So even if you're an adult smoking weed, what about secondhand smoke for the children around you? How is that potentially harming them?
Yeah.
Now, you can make the argument that it's not harmful for adults. There are studies that have shown that it's not necessarily harmful for adults. And so you can make that argument. But there's still an inherent danger that it can be harmful for you. There's a possibility. I meant that wine, let me just go back here.
That wine was and is more culturally accepted than weed, possibly because it was illegal, etc. But scientists have agreed that weed can make depression worse. It can encourage isolation. Yeah, I think that's exactly what Martine's saying.
Yeah, and Tracy's bringing up a good point about depression. There are other mental conditions that have been linked to weed. Now, I know other people will make the argument again that weed will uplift their mood or whatever the case is.
For how long? Like for long, you could do it for a few hours or whatever, and then are you in a deeper? Your high's higher and your low's lower.
I don't know. I mean, anecdotally, I will quote Joe Rogan because I watch Joe Rogan's podcast and he smokes weed regularly. I think he smokes it on a daily basis and he says it's good for his mood.
Okay.
Now, that's anecdotal. That's the problem with just using specific. I think you have to obviously have proper scientific studies. Yeah. But the point Tracy's making is proven that there are many people who have had very adverse effects mentally. Yes. Emotionally, or to their mental health or their emotional health from the use of HTC. Okay, so weed can be harmful. So these things is the reason why I say you can't make the argument about wine, weed. You can't say it's okay because it's okay.
Yeah,
that's a false argument. You need to make a different argument. We need to have a different conversation about weed than we have about wine. Yeah, those are two different conversations. And I've specifically spoken about wine and not about like whiskey or hard liquor, because obviously the line is much finer there. But I mean, I have friends who are whiskey lovers, connoisseurs, and they drink their little bit of whiskey and they don't get drunk, and they don't drink it to get drunk. They're not interested in that. They drink it because they love it.
Enjoy it.
I've tried to enjoy it with them, and I just can't. I just don't enjoy whiskey.
I think the thing is there's also the moderation. You have whiskey in moderation and step away from it and it's fine. Yeah.
And it seems to be, again, you can, because it doesn't immediately affect you if you use it in moderation. Okay, so that's that question. I think that's an important question. But I think the deeper question, which is really sort of, I want to go here. Sorry, I'm trying to get a new clean page. The deeper question, I think, which is really where you need to go with all of this, is about the question of why. Why are we doing this stuff? What's the reason for it? For this kind of go-to? And I think in general, and I mean, I think it's different for different people. Or let me put it this way. This is what I don't think is different for different people. I think every human being, our default switch, if you have to think of it like a piece of software where you get, and there's like a switch, there's a button being pressed. The default setting in our minds, the default setting is to run away from God.
Yeah, our sinful nature.
So whatever is the thing that comes into my life, whether it is depression, anxiety, fear, stress, frustration, my default switch is to run away from God and to run to find something
to fill that gap, that void.
And immediately maybe like medicate, make me feel a little bit better about whatever the stress, the fear. And that often gets heightened. I mean, I don't want to go into psychology or pop psychology or Christian psychology here, but there is a reality to it that wounds in our lives, woundedness that comes especially from our childhood, can enhance, can make that worse. And I'm not saying it in terms of blame. I'm not saying we play the victim where we say, oh, this happened to me as a child, and so therefore this is why I do this, and so I blame and I don't take responsibility.
You've got to take responsibility.
I'm simply saying that because there is a reality that our wounds, our hurts, can enforce this kind of behavior, this running away from God, running to something and trying to find something to run to. So I think that's the deeper question: is why are we doing what we're doing? And our default is to run away from God. So we need to flip that switch to learn to run to God. And it's interesting to me that this context here in 1 Corinthians 10 is around idolatry, around food sacrificed to idols and things around that. Because I think that if you look at the story of the Bible, the whole story, the whole narrative, if you look at it as an overarching story and you see all the different parts of it together, it's a story about a father trying to win his children, trying to lure his trying to draw in his children who keep running away from him, who keep rejecting him, who keep turning their backs on him, who keep seeking something else, and they go to idols. And to me, as I understand idolatry, to use that word, that language, and I'm talking about for my own life, that idolatry is really when I look for comfort, look for peace, look for fulfillment in something other than God. It is when I do this. This is the core of my idolatry. It's not the idol itself. No. It's the running away from God. It's not this is the idol or that's the idol. It's the something in my heart, which is sin, that triggers me in situations to go away from God. And that is my default behavior pattern. And whatever the thing is I run to is actually irrelevant. The thing is, it can be worse. I mean, drugs will obviously be worse than...
Yeah, it's not irrelevant, but it's still the fact that the issue is actually what are you running away from, not so much what you're running to. What am I running away from it and why?
And I think that's the question, the why question is in terms of when I'm honest with myself and there comes something and there's pressure or there's how do I respond to that? And am I running to God? So I'll use a personal example. My wife will laugh at this, but I do enjoy playing computer games sometimes. I find it a distraction. I find it like an escapism. But I also know, and I can see it in myself. I can see it in my own behavior, in my own thinking. I can see when I'm doing it because I'm trying to escape from something, from stress, from fear, from frustration. And when I do that, it is also isolating and it's not good for me and I'm not going to God and it becomes an idol and it becomes harmful and it's not actually pleasurable in a sense. It's not actually then just a fun hobby. It actually becomes a thing where you're pouring yourself into something in order to escape in order to get away from something that is sitting inside, something that is nagging you on the inside. And so I'm that might be a frivolous example, but I think we all have things like that. I think that's the reality. This is all of us. We all do. This is the human condition. It's not something that is true of, people who are drug addicts, do this. Every single human being does this. We run away from God. And the whole reprogramming, the renewal of our mind is all about learning to run to God. It's all about learning that God is everything and everything I need is in God and in His Word and in His Spirit and in His presence. And every situation, I press into him.
Yeah.
I go back to him. I go to his word. I go to him. I push into him. And that's very counterintuitive to our physical nature. It doesn't seem like it is going to work. It's not a quick fix.
No. And it requires effort, and it requires me to put in.
Yeah.
Whereas to take something else, it's so much easier.
And it requires faith, because
Hugely.
you're putting yourself in a situation, you sitting in a room with the word, with worship, praying, and you're trusting that, not trusting, God's not going to just come and solve all your problems, but you're trusting that in your communion with God, he's going to restore your heart.
Yeah.
And so you have to step into that with faith. And I think a lot of us, why we keep running away from God, is we think it's not going to work, and then I'm going to feel I've got this hurt, and I don't know how to deal with this hurt. And so we keep running away. And so that's why I think with all of this stuff, the question is really why. Why do I need to drink too much? Why do I need to play computer games too much? Why do I need to smoke weed? Why do I need that high? Why do I need to get that
Why
kick?
do I need to have another cookie at the cookie jar?
Yes.
Another piece of chocolate.
Why do I need to buy that extra whatever? It's different for us. That's what I'm saying. We love to make it like, oh, that person, oh, they're a drug addict, so that's
worse than mine, yeah.
It's not worse. It's just different.
Hugely.
Okay, I'm going to read you what Hendrik says. When you consider that weed has been around and utilized thousands of years, it makes sense that those who wrote the Bible would be well aware of the plant and its effects. So when we see the frequency of the word hemp across the Bible, it makes perfect sense why so many would come to the conclusion that marijuana was condoned and created by God himself. Also, plants and their cultivation for human use is specifically referenced in all of the following passages. Yeah, absolutely. And hemp is definitely something that people can use. I mean, hemp is the cousin of marijuana. It doesn't have any HTC in. And so, I mean, the reality is all of these things are useful. And again, even with medicinal marijuana, I think, and I don't want to really go into that because I think that's a whole thing on itself.
It's a different topic almost, yeah.
We were saying, and a few people confirmed that most medicinal marijuanas don't include HTC, but some of them do. But it might still be better for someone who's pain managing than, say, morphine. So if you and your doctor decide medicinal marijuana with HTC is better, it's healthier for you to manage pain, I'm not going to say to you, oh, you bad person for doing that. If you and your doctor have come, but you need to take into account all the risks with that. Just as with using morphine, if someone had to use morphine, it's probably more dangerous than using marijuana. But that's why I don't want to comment on those sorts of things, because I think those are situations,
individual cases
that you need to work through, in your spiritual community. Speak to your pastor about it if you feel, if you're worried about it. Bring it before the Lord, pray about it. I'm not in that position where I have to manage chronic pain, so I can't comment. It'd be easy for me to say, oh, well, just accept your pain, and just that would be such a flippant thing to say.
No,
but
you don't know what that's like.
We don't know what that's actually like. Okay, so why do we do it? So I'm just going to reiterate some of the questions that I already asked. Is would you do it in the open when it comes to smoking weed? Would you actually smoke weed in the presence of other believers openly? I don't know. Maybe someone would say yes. Maybe they've got a group of believers who do that together. So you would say, well, that's not really the issue then. I would go further then and say, well, does it actually have a positive effect on you and on your community and on the body? So the one person I spoke to and asked about this specifically was interesting, their story, because they came from a background of occult. Grew up in the occult, and they were just saying how drugs, weed in particular, but all drugs, they used a number of different drugs, is a gateway to the spiritual realm. It's a gateway to encountering the demonic, and they had experienced that because they had experienced the demonic as a child, and then they experienced it in having a bad trip. That other people would say, well, that's just psychological, but in their experience, and again, this is anecdotal because it's one person's experience, they would say, no, there's a real connection to that. Now, what we do know is that drugs have been used for thousands of years by many different cultures to help them enter into the spiritual realm. So different cultures do this differently. But if you go to folk religion in any part of the world, so folk religion is pagan religion. It's the worship of the spirits, spirit realm. It's animistic religion, and you find this all over the world. And it's interesting. You go to different places in the world, like South America, for example, a lot of and North America, the tribes there, a lot of them those who practice this in their practices would use different kinds of drug plants to help them enter into the spiritual realm. I mean, the most noteworthy of that is probably and I'm not sure where it originated from, but is the ayahuasca plant, which has has that substance in. If anyone knows the substance that's in there, that's the most powerful psychedelic substance.
Wow.
And if you listen to people who talk about their experiences from using the substance, I mean, from me listening to it from a spiritual perspective, clearly what they're encountering is the demonic realm.
Sure.
It is very obvious that they're encountering a different realm, and they say that even they're in a different realm when they take the substance. So I mean, that's very obvious. In other contexts, I mean, if you look at Hindu folk religion, they practiced meditation. They would get to a spiritual state, to nirvana, through just meditation. They were very skilled at meditation. If you look at the
Bushmen, they dehydrate.
Yeah, so if you go to the South African Museum in Cape Town, I don't know if it's still there. There's a display. It's very disturbing. You can walk past. You can watch on a video. You can watch them in one of their ceremonies, where what they do is they dance for hours and hours without drinking any water. They dance around the fire to get dehydrated, and they literally fall over into trance. That's how they get in contact with the spiritual realm, in order to contact, as they would say, and as most of these people would say they're speaking to their ancestors. But we know from a spiritual perspective that is a way for people to enter into the spiritual realm. So that is the other thing where I would say this is a serious danger. I don't know of people who use alcohol, for example, to enter into the spiritual realm. Maybe.
Never heard of that. Maybe they are.
I mean, I'm not saying alcohol is safe.
No.
Alcohol is very dangerous.
I think the word you used there was moderation with alcohol.
To
be able to stop.
The moment alcohol or weed becomes a habit and you forget about God, then it is wrong. When your life habits become auto, then you are falling off the path. I hear what you're saying, Hendrik, but I would still make the point that I think with weed, it is not something that is an either or. It's not something where there's a line that you can tread. And you can be like, oh, I'm gonna do this without it becoming a bad habit, because of the immediate effects it has on our brains. It immediately is affecting us from not having sound mind, and so that would be where I would have a question mark around. Again, if someone's using it for pain relief, is it better or worse than other forms of pain relief? And it potentially is better. So that's a very difficult area to go into. So I think for me, the last two questions, and I know we're sort of out of time, and maybe other people want to make further comments, but for me is just to ask what are you running away from? I think that's the question.
That's a big one. That's the main one, yeah.
Yeah, that we all have to ask, and that I have to ask myself. We all have to ask ourselves: is when I go to my default of running away from God, what is that? What is the thing that's triggering me that makes me want to run away? So I think that's something we all have to think about and say, Lord, what is it that I'm running away from? Why am I running away? What is that trigger? And then begin a process of learning to actually turn to God immediately when
in those situations,
when that trigger is there.
First,
Don't wait, but actually immediately go to God. I think a question related further to that, and this actually came from this person I was speaking to, and I'm just saying person because protecting their identity. They actually asked this question, which was pivotal for them. Is they said the big breakthrough for them came in understanding who God is, and then understanding who they are.
That's such a huge thing, to understand God's identity and your identity in Christ. And I think, once you've got that, it puts so many other things in perspective. Even though I don't think we ever fully understand, who God is, we're still God's revealing himself more and more to us, and we're still trying to pursue our identity in Christ more and more. But that's such a, for me, I know that was such a huge turning point to realizing who God is and who I am in Him.
Yeah. And I think, I mean, both of those things, you know, knowing who God is, understanding, especially who Jesus is and what He's done for us and who He is and the power that is in relationship with Him.
Yeah.
And then understanding who we are, because it goes back to the whole thing of dissipation, you know, of is it profitable for you? Ooh, I'm moving this. I'm supposed to be clicking here. Is it profitable? Is it edifying? And if you go to the bottom of the scripture, it says, "Give no offense either to the Jews or to the Greeks or to the church of God, just as I also please all men in all things, not seeking my own profit, but the profit of the many, so that they may be saved." So look at what Paul's ultimate goal is. He says, it's not about him.
No,
it's about a bigger picture.
The body and the body being saved.
And but it's also about him getting his identity, because he knows he understands his calling. He understands what God is calling him into the kingdom. And I think that so often our hurt, our pain becomes controlling in our lives, becomes everything when we're not looking at God. So we're constantly looking at ourselves in a negative way, but we also don't know what God's made us for. We don't understand the purpose we have in life. So so we just squander our life. We waste our life, and it doesn't necessarily have to be weed or too much drinking. It can be just wasting our life. It can be just endless hours of television. It can be just whatever it is. It actually doesn't matter what the thing is. It's, am I actually understanding who God has made me, and am I fully walking in that? Or am I just, I'm just sort of like going through life, trying to medicate.
Yeah. Going through the motions of each day. And I think, it's a big one.
Yeah, and I think, and you're saying through the motions, but even as you said that, I was thinking, and controlled then by our emotions. But, you know, the roller coaster of whatever is my feeling in the moment, that becomes, dominant.
That to control me, yeah.
Just Hendrik there says, meditation is good if we use it wisely, Joshua 1:8. Yeah, I mean, I think I get what you're saying with meditation. I'm not sure, but obviously when we meditate on the Word of God. We're not meditating in a way that is empty our minds. We're meditating, we're putting stuff into our mind. And again, like relating that to weed, I would find it, I mean, do we smoke weed in order to get closer to God?
To fill our minds with the Spirit and with His Word, yeah.
I don't know if that's even remotely possible. Maybe I'm prejudging that, but I don't know if,
never heard of it.
I don't know if we're putting our mind in that state of not being fully present and with the Holy Spirit who is living within me. Because the thing what God says is, don't say, where's the word? You know, He says, let's just go there quickly. You know, people say, well, oh, okay, that's great, Martin, but like, how do I do this? How do I experience God? You know, He's far off. And what does God say? He says, but righteousness is based on faith that speaks as follows. Do not say in your heart, who will ascend into heaven, that is to bring Christ down, or who will descend into the abyss, that is to bring Christ up from the dead. But what does it say? So what does faith say? Faith says the word is near you, it is in your mouth and in your heart. That is the word of faith which we are preaching. So you don't need to go somewhere to get the word. You're meditating on the word of God that He's spoken, and you're present with that. And I think that's what God is encouraging us all to do, is to actually move away, or undo this trigger. I'm just going to put this back up here. This trigger system of pain, discomfort, frustration, run away from God. Flip the switch, and learn to immediately run to God. Run into Him, press into Him, seek Him out, seek His word, seek time in fellowship with Him. And the byproduct of that is you will want to be in fellowship with other believers as well, because that's what happens when you spend time in the presence of God. Yeah, I agree with you, Hendrik. Choices, God must be in charge of all. God must be in charge of our lives. Thank you, guys. Well, that was one question. We have some other interesting questions about spiritual gifts, about the gift of tongues. We're going to get to those. I don't know what our schedule is going to be like the rest of the year, because I think next week, and I'm not going to put him on the spot here, but I think Sheldon is with me next week, or possibly the week after.
Okay, cool.
And I think that's kind of where we're going to kind of
That's kind of December
ending
already.
it for. We're gonna sort of end early in December. We might do one session maybe later than that, but so we don't know how it's gonna pan out. But we will then pick things up again. We will let you know, and we'll be back again next year sometime in January.
We will be.
Yeah.
We will be.
Thank you to everybody who engaged in the chat. I know there's others who watch in who don't want to engage. Thank you for watching in and just being part of it and just hearing and listening. If you found this helpful, if it was beneficial to you, share the video, like the video. It's the best way for other people to get hold of it. Thank you, Hendrik, for all your comments and engagement. It was good to engage with you, and for everyone else, Tracy, that engaged, and just the others who joined in.
Yeah.
Final thoughts from you, babes, before we close? My voice.
Yeah, to me the big one is always, what are you running from, and then what are you filling it with? And filling it with anything other than Christ is a lot easier. It's passive. It's a quick fix. Filling it with Christ requires me to be very active and deal with the messy stuff. It's active and messy, which is hard work, and our spiritual and our human nature doesn't want to do that. It wants easy and quick. But yeah, it's what am I actually running from, and am I then running to Christ? And like I said earlier, the huge thing for me was realizing who God is, even though, like I said, we haven't completely realized that, who God is and who my identity in Him, who I am in Him.
And I like what you're saying. You said, it's a very active thing. I mean, immediately the word that came to mind for me is to engage. It means to engage as opposed to disengage. I've got to actually engage. I've got to actually, and sometimes it's difficult because our triggers, our patterns, our, to use a term from Hot Styles, our templates. We've created these templates that immediately when this happens, then I run away, or I try and disengage, or I just want to get away from, or I just try to medicate, or whatever that thing is. And that's where the question should be. That's where our struggle should be, and we should be taking that stuff to God. And I think my final thought on this would be that I think there's a lot of us, and I want to just sort of put this in the general, who a lot of the church often has been sort of a culture of eating one meal a week.
Yeah.
And if you think about that as an adult, that you would eat one meal, you don't even prepare the meal. You go somewhere to get fed the meal, and that's your meal for the week. I mean, it's a very, very unhealthy way to live.
Yeah, totally.
Yet spiritually, that's how many believers are living. They're living to go to church to get a meal that's prepared for them. They don't even prepare it themselves. Yeah. And that's their food for the week. And we need to be healthy as believers. We need to become mature, which means we ourselves have to prepare the meal, in a sense. We have to actually...
We're eating daily.
Yeah, and make that effort, do the work, get into the Word, get into the time in the Spirit, eat, get filled up, get filled with God. We have to be proactive. We can't just react to when we're going to feel down, when we're going to feel frustrated, when we're going to feel afraid, when we're going to feel rejected, because those things are going to happen. And we need to actually be feeding ourselves constantly through the Word in order to be built up, and put our eyes on God. And that way, I think, is how we learn to just run to God consistently and not run away. And I think
when we're doing that, we're then edifying the body. We're building into the body. The body's been lifted up because of where I'm at.
Yeah.
And who I am.
Yeah. Thank you, everybody. Thanks if there's any final questions, I know we're over time, but if there's anyone else who wants a final question or comment or word, thank you, Hendrik. Jy kan afvlieg, ja. Ons sal hallo sê. Anyone else who wants to add anything? Otherwise, we are going to sign off for tonight. Thank you, everybody. And
thank you, and good night. Yeah.
We will see you guys next time.
Yeah, thank you.